When you've had a brain injury, it's so easy to feel overwhelmed and unsure of how to truly care for your brain in the day to day life. What habits will actually help, or what mindsets make a difference? And how do you know when something just is not working for you? Today, we have a panel of our brain injury community answering these questions and sharing more about their journeys with brain injury to encourage all of us in order to learn to care for our brains post injury. There is always hope, and you are not alone. Hi, I'm Cristabelle Braden, and this is my brain injury podcast, Hope Survives. This is an uplifting podcast to bring hope to your darkest days. As a survivor of traumatic brain injury and multiple concussions and re-injuries, I know what it's like to struggle to find hope. I don't want anyone to feel as alone as I did, and that's why over 10 years ago, I started an online community called Hope After Head Injury, which has now launched into a nonprofit organization called Hope Survives. Hope Survives envisions a world in which every survivor of brain injury and every member of their family are seen, loved, heard, valued, supported, uplifted, and never alone. This podcast is an extension of that, and I'd love to invite you to join along as we explore the realities of life with brain injury, with messages of encouragement, interviews with doctors and professionals, and survivor and family stories. No matter where you're at on your journey, there is always hope.
With a little hope, you can make it through today. With a little faith, someday you'll get through the pain. Just a little love is enough to light the way through your darkest night. Hope survives. A little faith, a little love. Hope survives.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Hope Survives podcast. Today we have another brain injury community panel, and we are talking about brain health habits and learning to care for our brains post injury. It can be so overwhelming because you don't always know what to do and where to go and how to find help. And today we hope to unravel a little bit of that for you when it comes to lifestyle and habits and hearing real stories of real brain injury survivors sharing their experiences. Today we have Stefanie Beeney, who you may remember from our previous panel on the ambiguous loss and grief. We have Charlotte Endorf and Farook Outhmani joining us. I am so looking forward to introducing them to all of you and our incredible conversation that we had today. I also want to remind you guys that we have launched our online store for Hope Survives. 100% of the profits go towards supporting our programs. And as a special thank you for being a podcast listener, there is a discount code for you. All capitals podcast 10 that is valid only through the end of this month. So if you're listening in July, it is valid through July 31st on our online store, just as a way to say thank you. So we hope that you'll check some of those things out at our website, hopesurvives.org. We have a lot of great programs happening. We've just had a nutrition workshop, which was fantastic. We have more workshops coming up, one called Pacing Your Plans in August with Ali Rayum, which is all about how do we pace ourselves with our brain injury and still be able to do things in life and not get too overwhelmed. So it's basically about managing cognitive energy. There will be a lot more coming this fall as well. I'm so excited for a workshop we're having with Dr. Schmoe about rewiring hope and talking about functional neurology. Dr. Jeremy Schmoe is from the Functional Neurology Center, and we actually have him here today to do a podcast spotlight. So in this next clip, Dr. Schmoe is going to answer the question, what habits are most helpful for those with brain injury? And so what are some small changes that you can make to help your journey? So let's hear from our expert, Dr. Jeremy Schmoe.
There's so many small little things that you can do every day that make huge changes in the ability of your brain to get better faster. So, I would say number one is movement, and going in and just doing like a cat cow pose yoga. Like if you can do that and get that pumping happening at the thoracolumbar junction and then at your whole like cranial junction. Have you ever seen anybody do that before? So it's doing that whole, as your head goes back, then you breathe in, and then when you come forward, you breathe out. And that movement of getting that can actually induce an improved function of cerebral spinal fluid flow going around the brain. And what we know is with the brain, you need to clear the debris in the brain. And that happens through what's called the brain's lymphatic system. So doing that kind of yoga type motion combined with respiration and breathing, that can really help. And that's something, easy that people can do. If you can't get into all fours doing it, you could just try and do that motion while you're in a chair to get it to happen, or even go in and start doing like some foam rolling like through your thoracic spine and work on your breathing. And that's something like really easy and helpful. And they've shown that with sleep. So obviously the next thing is sleep, like getting your sleep dialed as much as you can. So doing things to get to sleep on time, making sure the environment of your room is appropriate, making sure you have good airflow going on in that room is a good idea. And then getting the lighting dialed in and making sure that, you're not on your phone, and getting your whole nervous system all cranked up before you go to bed. So like don't doom scroll online right before you go to bed and try and go to bed. That's actually going to affect the activation, the way that your brain and your midbrain and these pathways are integrating. But when you sleep and you get into that deep restful sleep, that's when you actually can clear your lymphatic system and those inflammatory pathways in the brain. And that's really, really important. Something else that's really easy is hydration. So making sure that you're really hydrated. So neurons need to have hydration and energy and fuel delivery. Making sure that you are keeping your blood sugar stable is really important. So like for me, I have my Echo water bottle here, and this is actually a molecular hydrogenated water bottle where it hydrogenates my water and I drink it throughout the day. I have it hooked up to an app, and then it tells me like, Dr. Schmoe, you need to drink your water. So like keeping up on hydration is a really good idea. So far we've got, all right, get movement, get that activation of your CSF flow, try and get your sleep and work on getting your sleep dialed in. Something huge is like magnesium threonate can be really helpful for calming some neurons down and regulating your GABAergic levels in the brain. And fatty acids, like just getting good fatty acids, taking fish oil before you go to bed has been really helpful for my sleep personally. And then even taking some anti-inflammatories can start to calm some pathways down. And then working on hydration is just awesome. Like if you actually look at how much water that you're actually taking in, you probably realize that you're not drinking enough. And it's trying to get those appropriate ratios and looking at sometimes getting your electrolyte levels appropriate. I like this product. It's called LMNT. So it's appropriate, sodium and potassium ratios of your fluids. And then generally just getting more movement activity throughout the day. So if you have a hard time ambulating and moving, just doing anything that's like complex activity, you're hanging out, you start doing some like complex movements of the arms and of the legs, your cerebellum absolutely loves that stuff. So that activation will drive that brain and get better feedback. So I would say just movement, activation, autonomics, breathing, hydration, CSF flow. I mean, those are 5 pretty easy things that you could do that are going to work on different levels of your nervous system, ranging from getting better blood flow to the head, to helping with inflammation, to working with your circadian rhythms, to working on, getting that hydration and getting that really dialed in. So your brain is able to build plasticity, communicate with neurons more effectively, and it will allow all your other therapies to work better. So say if you're going in and you're trying to do a vision therapy session and your blood sugar's tanked, you're not going to get the same bang for your buck as if you had your blood sugar stable. So whether that's getting a glucose monitor to look at your blood sugar, like that could be important. And obviously looking at diet and nutrition to help dial that in and get your blood sugar more stable.
Thank you so much for that insight, Dr. Schmoe. And we want to take this moment to thank the Functional Neurology Center for being a sponsor of our podcast. The FNC's personalized neuro recovery programs offer hope for those suffering from brain injuries, dysautonomia, vestibular, chronic pain, stroke, movement dysfunction, developmental disorders, PPPD, FND, and complex post concussion. Sorry, I'm stumbling over my words a little bit today. I'm quite tired, but I know we had to get this episode out. So um, hopefully what I'm saying makes sense. But yes, we are so thankful to the FNC. We do have a workshop with Dr. Schmoe coming up, as I mentioned, on September 4th. There is a chance for you guys to participate in a live Q&A with Dr. Schmoe, and you do not want to miss that. So make sure you sign up on our website. And I'm just so grateful for all of your support of Hope Survives as we are continuing to grow our nonprofit. But anyway, that's enough for me here. Without further ado, I'd love to introduce our panelists and get into our Brain Health Habits community panel, talking about how to care for your brain post-injury. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome to our brain injury community panel on brain health habits. I am thrilled to have three incredible warriors of brain injury with us today, and I'm looking forward to sharing their stories with all of you listening and them sharing how brain health habits has been a part of their recovery journey. So to get started, I'm going to call on Farook because guess what? Farook is the one who came up with this topic idea for us. So I had to have you on this panel. So thank you so much for being here. One of our Hope ambassadors. Oh, no, wait, you're on our advisory council, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep,
On the
yep.
Brain Injury Advisory Council. And when we had emailed out before launch, like, what are some things you think we should cover? He shared that he really thinks we should talk about brain health habits. So I'm glad to have you here. Would you share a brief overview of your personal journey with brain injury and what brought you to the panel today?
Definitely. I'd say most of my journey, along with a variety of symptoms, has mostly been managing what emotions have come out of me since my injury. So I've been more sensitive to things. I've realized that I got more emotion than I knew how to deal with sometimes. So sometimes that's low moments, sometimes it's just dealing with frustration. So as long as I can figure it out for me, I'd like to share that with other people.
That's great. And when was your brain injury?
2022.
Okay. So a couple
Yep.
years into this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing. All right, let's move on to Steph, who you may remember from our previous panel on ambiguous laws. I asked Steph to come back for this one simply because I know Steph has been dedicated to brain health. And so I'm excited to hear from you. Steph, would you share with us?
My brain injury journey really started with a concussion that quietly unraveled the life that I knew. And it wasn't a recovery that was about physical healing as much as it was about challenging the way that I viewed productivity and rest and even my own identity. What brought me to this panel is a desire to speak to people, to the survivors that are still figuring it out, to say that I see you, you're not alone. There's healing strength and joy ahead, but it's all going to be on your terms and at your pace.
Thank you so much, Steph. I'm looking forward to hearing more. And Steph is one of our Hope ambassadors, as well as Charlotte. So, Charlotte, would you introduce yourself and some of your journey?
Sure. It was 2018, 7 years ago, when I took a day off from work. I was a workaholic back then, working 6 days a week from sunup to sundown. And wouldn't you know, the day I take a day off, I'm riding with a friend and she misses a stop sign. And I walked away from the accident, but later found out that my skull was fractured. And so I had 20 doctors tell me you'll never read, write, walk, talk again. And I proved them wrong. I just finished rewriting a book and I'm a public speaker with my husband's help now. I guess the reason I wanted to get involved in this is simply because there's many times I would get so down and I just didn't know which way to turn until I got acquainted with Zoom and things. And so I wanted to hear from some other people who want to get well and are doing what it takes to get well.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. I think that's kind of part of the brain injury journey, right? Doing what it takes to get well. And the definition of well or wellness, I think, shifts as you go through brain injury journey, because what looked like wellness for me when I first had my injury versus what looks like wellness for me now has actually a different set of goals and a different set of things that we're focusing on. Right now, I'm focusing heavily on gut health. That was not something that I had addressed before, right? So there's a process and a journey. And I'm so excited to hear from all of you. So, our first question on this topic, we're going to kind of ease into the brain health habits. I first want to ask, what has the process of learning to take care of your brain post injury looked like for you? So, Steph, would you start us out here?
Sure. I mean, really learning to care for my brain post injury has been a deeply humbling and transformative experience. Um, at first, I really thought it would be mostly physical rest, a little bit of medication, maybe some therapy in there. But I quickly discovered that taking care of my brain required like a complete shift in how I actually approached rest and set boundaries, and even how I define productivity. As a result, I've learned to listen more closely to the kind of the whispers of fatigue that echo through life and the signals that I'm overstimulated, and to take those cues that I need to ensure that I have the joy and connection, but also I'm respecting what my brain really needs to thrive in its world. Things like sleep hygiene checklists and mood tracking, those kinds of things become essential. They're not luxuries, but they're used as medicine. They're moments of absolute frustration and grief that I'm sure everyone on this panel could speak to, especially around the invisible symptoms and the things that people don't see. But there's also growth, the resilience, the ability to advocate for myself, which I couldn't do when I started this journey in 2019, and how I'm able to show up not just for myself, but also for other people on this path now.
Thank you so much for sharing, Steph. I really appreciated when you talked about the little whispers of fatigue, because it's sometimes hard to know what your brain needs, right? At what times. And it's a journey of learning how to listen and be sensitive to that. So, Farook, how about you? What has the process of learning to take care of your brain post injury looked like for you?
I have to lean into learning self advocacy. I would say it's a lot of self awareness because there are things you feel that no one else can feel. There are things you can describe that these doctors can't quite relate to. But when you start to learn your body, you'll realize as you're going on in this journey that the solutions come from somewhere that doesn't seem connected at all. It doesn't seem like you could have less headaches by spending more time in the sun. It doesn't seem like tiring days, exhausting days can be calm, mellow days if you get enough sleep. It's pretty strange, but it feels like, I guess, a lot like you're taking care of a child and now you're your child. It's a weird sort of phenomenon to me, but it comes with its own list of responsibilities, like Steph said.
Thank you for sharing. I really like that perspective that you wouldn't think, some of the things that actually help are things you wouldn't have thought of. So I'm looking forward to hearing more of that as we go on today. So Charlotte, how about you? What has the process of learning to take care of your brain post injury looked like?
For me, it's been trial and error. I've constantly had to slow myself down. Like I told you, I was a workaholic before. And so it took me the longest time to realize it's okay not to be working from sun up to sundown. You still are a worthwhile person and you still have value, and you have to take care of yourself or you suffer for it. The thing that helped me the most is the spoon method, where you take, say, 20 spoons and you put them in a container, and as you do tasks, some tasks harder than others, such as I'm going to cook lunch. Maybe that takes 3 spins today. Tomorrow it may take 5 spins. But when I get to the end of those 20 spins, I better be resting. And still, I don't use the physical spoons anymore. I try to listen to the cues, like one of the other speakers talked about. But if I do those things and persist, maybe something I couldn't do yesterday, I can do today, and think ahead in my schedule. Like I had a doctor's appointment today, but I knew that would just wipe me out. And so I rescheduled that doctor's appointment to make this. I just have to do what it takes.
Thank you so much for sharing, Charlotte. I really appreciate that understanding of how do we manage our energy, right? And that's part of brain health. So I'm actually going to stay with you, Charlotte, here. Were there habits that you had before your injury that you had to change? And what did you learn from that process?
My habits were always to go, go, go. And I was like the Energizer bunny, you might think, of I just went. And I saw on Facebook once where when a person with brain injury wakes up, they don't have a full battery like you had before you were hurt. And so I often think of that analogy and really work on pacing myself and remembering one day I may not be able to do something, but the next I will. For instance, yesterday cooking was really difficult for me, but today I made a cake for a funeral in our church coming up. I've got the meal prep for supper when my husband gets home from work. Those are all things that I couldn't do yesterday, but today they're working out fine. So you just got to see what you can do and go ahead and do it when you can.
Thank you so much for sharing, Charlotte. Steph, what about you? Were there habits from pre injury that you had to change? And what'd you learn through that?
Oh, yeah. Before my injury, I was basically wired for constant motion. Productivity was kind of my default mechanism. And I felt like rest was something that had to be earned. Multitasking, overcommitting, pushing through, those were all like attributes that I highly valued. I wore them like badges of honor. But brain injury unraveled that mindset entirely. I had to unlearn that hustle, I guess, and to learn to honor limits instead. Not as a weakness, so to speak, but more as a wisdom. Slowing down felt super frustrating and foreign, but that's where I found the clarity and began to really notice how that overstimulation would drain me and how even one bad night's sleep would affect my mood and my energy, or how ignoring those signals would lead to setbacks. So I guess what I've really learned in all of this is that healing demands presence and not perfection. It's not about doing more, but doing what matters and doing that with intention. It means it's okay to cancel plans, or to pick the nap instead of the checklist, and to be able to change what is happening or what is going to happen as you go.
Yeah, that's so good. And especially what you said about feeling before like you had to earn rest. Can you talk a little bit more about that after brain injury? Just how did you learn how to get out of that mindset?
A lot of mental health therapy. To be perfectly honest, it was hard, and it nearly broke me. To change that mindset to where I was finding all of my value really was in what I did, and all of that. And I talked a little bit about that on the grief podcast previously, but to really to just gradually take those little bits away and add in bits of value that made more sense with where I'm at now. Um, and it took a long time and a lot of work.
Thank you for sharing. Farouk, how about you? Were there habits you had before your injury that you had to change and what'd you learn through it?
I definitely had a lot of habits I had to change after my injury. I Mostly bad ones. I think like everyone else, mostly bad ones. I can tell you not taking the time to set boundaries not taking the time to express emotions, being more inclined to be a people pleaser. I've found that post injury, it takes so much cognitive effort to figure out how to say the right thing, how to be more careful, how to be more considerate of others. And I realized not only is that exhausting me and I'm not having a good time, but I'm also speaking up less about things that I need, and now I need more. So what I learned is that for the same reason that I have to take care of me, I have to take care of my space and my relationships. And some of these changes are similar to the workaholic type. One of the tips I got was to work by time, not by task. So if I'm going to clean the kitchen, I'm going to clean for 15 minutes. I'm not going to clean the kitchen. Otherwise, I'll get stuck in there looking at all these things, thinking about where it's going to go. And before I know it, I'm feeling anxious. I'm getting a headache and I don't want to be bothered. And it changes my day. So learning boundaries, learning how to express and respect myself. So
Yeah,
that's the good
wow.
thing on the other side.
Yeah, that's great. That kind of leads into the next question. When you talked about learning how to do things by time and not by task, that resonated with me because I get stuck on tasks so much. It's either I have trouble starting, or once I'm in it, I can't focus, or then if I get too focused, I can't unfocus and I'm like stuck in it. I have a hard time transitioning from one thing to the next. And so I'm gonna use that tactic, Farook. I'm writing that one down for later. But our next question is: what daily or weekly habits have you found most helpful in your brain injury recovery journey? So, are there practical things that you can share with our listeners? So, Steph, let's go to you first here.
I think the biggest thing for me has been what you set for habits today don't have to be your habits later. Remember that you can always change them as they fit where you are at in your recovery. So, kind of what I'm going to talk about is a little bit more of where I'm at right now, because that's easier to come up with here. But like daily, I know that I have to prioritize that restorative sleep. If I don't get my sleep, forget it. Everything is going downhill. Um, I need to start my mornings quiet without screens, no to-do list, just check in on my energy levels and, go out in nature for a few minutes with my cup of coffee and start slow. Because if I try to start fast, if I wake up and think I've got 27 things I need to do today, hey, I'm not going to get any of them done. But also I'm going to overdo it on some of those. And like Farouk mentioned, that time versus task has been a valuable tool to getting through those things. Um, but I really do anchor my day in those quiet moments. Kind of weekly, I set aside intentional time to reflect. What worked for me this week? What didn't work for me this week? And what kind of, blew me off the rails a little bit? So what can I learn from the week that I just had? Because otherwise it's really easy to get derailed and then look back and be like, well, I don't know where I came off track. But I was doing good. I was doing good. And now I'm in this massive setback. What do I do? Well, if I know what I was doing well that was helping me, I can try to layer those little pieces in. I can try to change one thing at a time and, not changing everything at once, because then you don't know what's working or what's not working. Little things, layer and stack those little tiny changes in and focus on what those little things can do to you over time. But yeah, I definitely have to plan in rest a lot more than I ever thought I would. And rest doesn't always mean I'm sleeping either. Rest can be active rest. It can be pulling out some colored pencils and a little kid's coloring book and coloring, or you know, playing with my dog. Um, Things that are not overly stimulating to me, and what's not overly stimulating to me is going to be different than what's not overstimulating to somebody else.
That was a great response, Steph. Thank you. I especially loved the idea of stacking little habits, because we talk so much about lifestyle and like sleep. We've mentioned sleep hygiene a lot. Sleep, nutrition is a big one, intentional movement. I think almost every expert podcast guest that I've had on has mentioned that. No matter what topic we're on, I think they have all touched on nutrition, sleep, intentional movement, and how important those things are. But those are habits that they can be hard to do it all at once, right? So I love that, if you can make a small change a little bit, that's really inspiring. So, Farook, let's go to you next. What daily or weekly habits have you found most helpful in your brain injury recovery journey?
I have so many. I feel like such a geek for these things. First, just the idea of setting up any habits weekly, daily, takes some cognitive energy. And I think everybody should give themselves credit for even considering that. For me, I realized a lot of the work was on the front end and it was very exhausting. But what I decided is that I would treat me like a 6-year-old. So I need a list. I need to know what I'm doing. If I'm not cleaning the kitchen, I'm washing this dish and putting it over there. And then I'm going to grab some more Dawn and I'm going to scrub this one and put it over there. And I wrote out on a list what the tasks were. I got like a little flip index card, sort of Rolodex for all of my chores. Because if I forget what I'm supposed to do next, um, nobody knows. Nobody knows. But I built these lists same way I have post-its for all of my clothes because sometimes I forget what my shirts are. So post-its, list, and I would get one of those clickers, like the little clickers that the coaches would use. I stopped, but I still keep count. I would use a clicker every time I did something. So if I made a list, that's a click. If I washed dishes, that's a click. If I timed it and I went by 15 minutes instead of just staying there for 45 minutes, not noticing, that's a click because I'm sticking to my system. And I went off of that. Just those are my wins for the day. So if I wouldn't say, let me finish 7 tasks, I'd say if I got 20 clicks, it meant that I was doing things I wanted to do for me. And that counts with water, sleep, all the good stuff.
I love that. It's like celebrating those small wins. We have to. And that's such a cool, I've never even thought of using a clicker. That is a great advice. So, Charlotte, how about you? What daily or weekly habits have you found most helpful in your recovery journey?
I used to clean the whole house in one day, and that's just not possible anymore. So I divided out and put a rest day in between. And I usually use my phone for Zooms, and so I didn't realize all this clutter in the back of me until I looked at this picture. That looks horrible. So that'll be on my list of things to do in a couple of days. I'll need a rest day after this today, but my grandson was here. He's 10 for 2 weeks, and he's a pretty self-sufficient kid, but just the difference in having somebody to take care of and somebody he has asthma, be sure he's not having an attack. He's lactose intolerant, be sure he's not eating the wrong thing. And he gets migraines, and he had a migraine. And it literally took me 2 days after he was gone to recover from that. And I just slept and slept and slept. I love him dearly, but it's still a lot for me at this point. But like Cristabelle said, eat healthy, sleep, the gut health. And something that really helps me, and my dogs love it too, is trying to get out every day and walking according to what I feel like that day. Maybe it's just to the end of the driveway, or maybe I have a 2.5 mile walk figured out. Some days I can do that, but I keep track of how far I walk and make it a goal and look up. So I'm not doing 50 miles in one day. I'm doing 50 miles over the summer. And then I look up other people's walks. And, I have friends going overseas to do 100-mile walks in a week. Well, I'm doing the same thing by looking at YouTube and seeing things that are going to be on her journey, but I'm doing it from the comfort of my home at my own pace.
Thank you so much for sharing, Charlotte. I appreciate too that when you talked about the habits, you also talked about the rest needed to kind of recover from them. And I think that's such a valuable part of this. That's part of brain health, right? We talk about habits, and I think a lot of time we think of things we do, but what if rest is part of that? So many of us think of rest as something you don't do. It's like of not doing something, but there's ways to actively rest, like Steph talked about earlier, like coloring or other things. So I love what all of you have to share. I love these panels because you get like you each touch on different things, which is just so cool. So, all right, next question. Are there things you found that did not work for you? And how were you able to pivot? So, Farouk, you're up first.
Definitely. When I was in well, I'm still doing some physical therapy, but I was working with a vestibular physical therapist, helped me with my balance so that I could walk. And one of the tips he had was to pay attention to your symptoms and let your symptoms be your guide. So how much you're going to do today is based off of how you feel. And that worked physically, and that worked with some other things, but it did not work emotionally for me because there were some things I didn't know how to work through, some things I didn't really know how to think through or talk through. So I would write them, but after writing so much, I would forget what letters look like in cursive. So I would get confused as I was writing. So it stressed me out. And I was trying to free myself from that stress, and my head started hurting. But that was one of the few things I had to push through so that I could have rest in my mind, so that I could have peace. So I find that a lot of the tips that I've come across and that we all receive are great tips. And some of them, um, they work in most occasions, but you may have to take the initiative to break the rule if it helps you. So that's what I got.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And I love that you acknowledged the whole person, right? Because you can think about your brain health and your physical health and your physical therapy and the things that maybe are good for your body. But if it's not good for your mental health, then it's actually not good for your body, right? So it's that journey of how do you see and acknowledge that. And I love that you were able to recognize that for yourself. And I think that's really valuable. Thank you for that. All right, Charlotte, let's go to you next. Are there things that did not work for you, and how did you learn how to pivot?
For the first couple of years, cleaning was impossible. I would try to dust, I would try to vacuum, I would try to mop, and every time I extended my arms from out, my doctor said that's what was the cause of all the head pain I was having. So every once in a while, we would hire someone to do it. So my husband wouldn't have to work full time all day and then come home and be cleaning house. And here I am sitting with my feet propped. I felt guilty as all get out, but that's what we had to do. Cooking. At first, I would go into the kitchen. I knew I needed to make something, but I couldn't figure out how to get from step A to step Z. And so um, my husband got the good idea to, there's all those, and I'm not advertising for anyone, but Hello Fresh is the first one I think of. And they're already proportioned out. So I'm not going to cut myself when I'm trying to cut up those vegetables and things like that. And just by saving some steps, it enabled me to get my act back together and be able to cook again, like I said I did today. Mechanical things and I still have a big problem. Our ice maker, my husband will use it and it's fine. I want to go get a glass of ice water and the darn thing will not work. He shows me how he pounds on something and it works, and darn it, I could pound all day and it's not working. So some things I just have to realize I need help with. So when he gets home from work, the first thing I'm going to say is, could you please fix the ice maker? And something so simple. I told you I was cooking today, and he raised some onions outside. and they're huge. And I went to pull those onions, and all that was happening was the green part was breaking off, and the onions are still in the ground. And I guess that's kind of mechanical too. So when he gets home after he's done with the ice maker, he's going to have to go pull me some onions because for the life of me, can't figure out how to pull an onion today. It's one of those days.
I just love the joy that you said is one of those days with. I mean, to me, that shows the journey you've been on, right? That you're able to laugh about it because it's a process to get there. And thank you for your vulnerability and sharing some of that because, yeah, I mean, so many days it can be so frustrating things that work for other people and don't work for us. It's like, why? How can we not figure this out? But I hope that you get your onions out later. You'll have to send us an update so we can find out. But all right, Steph, how about you? Things that did not work for you and how have you learned to pivot?
Oh, geez, there were a lot of things that didn't work for me. It's been a long road, but really, like, I used to stick to such a rigid schedule, and I used to think that that would give me that control over my recovery. In reality, that structure really was the source of the stress, and my brain wasn't operating on any kind of a predictable timetable that, I felt it should be operating on. And trying to force myself into that rigid structure really led to more setbacks. Early on, I also relied heavily on screen-based rest. I mean, we've all been guilty of laying in front of a TV probably more than we should have, or scrolling too much, not realizing how much of a cognitive load that still demands. Even if you don't think you're doing anything active with that, like, there's still a cognitive demand there. What I learned is that, pivoting meant getting honest with myself. It meant replacing that rigidity with some rhythms, a gentler structure that had, the ebbs and flows with it, redefining rest as like true sensory breaks, and seeking support, asking questions, allowing myself to be a beginner at things, knowing that I didn't need to know everything or be an expert, again and again and again. And I'm still a beginner at a lot of things now, and that's okay. In a former life, I saw those pivots as failures, indicators that I wasn't going to accomplish the plan that I had set out or that had been set. And so that was also another challenging mindset to change. What I now see is those pivots aren't failures, but they're part of the learning process. My brain isn't resisting healing. It's asking for something different. So it's really about, okay, that didn't work, but what will work? I still find things that don't work for me on a regular basis. And what didn't work today doesn't mean it's not ever going to work. It may be something that I need to go back to later. I just wasn't ready for it, or it didn't serve me at that time, just as things that are working for me now aren't going to work for me forever, and I need to go make those pivots as well. And so always being flexible in that sense to make those changes, is definitely a huge healthy brain habit to have.
Thank you so much, Steph. I can relate to that so much. I was thinking about how things that had worked for me in previous seasons that don't work for me now. For example, I used to love to journal. Journaling was a big thing for me. It helped my brain. It made me feel connected to my faith, to my mental health. And then there came a time that last year, through having COVID, my right side of my body had atrophied after my brain injury, and I couldn't use my right hand for 4 months, which meant writing with a pencil was just like such a horrible task that every time I would go to journal or to write, I would be depressed that my hand didn't want to cooperate. I couldn't play the piano without my right hand not hitting the keys the way I want it to. And I didn't want to songwrite. I didn't want to write. I didn't want to journal. I didn't want to create. And being creative, which is something that I've always used as a coping mechanism, suddenly became a trigger for me. So I had to step back from journaling, from songwriting, and allow my body and brain to heal. And I would like to tell you that in the last month, I've started playing and songwriting again, right? And so, but I had to take a break for like almost a year. So learning that just because something isn't working for you or something did work for you in the past, we can't try and force it. Brain injury is like this, right? Seasons, and brain health, we have to adjust as our brain is healing and growing. So I'm just going to pause here. Does anyone have anything you'd like to add here in this question before we move to the next? I don't want to go too quickly through the topics. Does anyone feel free to put your hand up if you have something to add about this?
I do have one. So I, much like everyone else, full day workaholic, very active person. What I loved beyond a doubt was riding my bike. And when I wasn't riding my bike, I was driving everywhere. So I could ride my bike for a good 6 hours. Maybe not back to back, but 2 hours here, 2 hours there. I could do it all day. Loved it. And I felt the same way about driving. But I got so exhausted from watching a football go by or watching a few cars speed by. Even looking at my phone and scrolling, if I scrolled too fast, it got blurry, gave me such a headache. I said, there's no way. There's no way I could do this. And I felt like, as much as I never felt like I lived a fast life, but I felt like I had to be a very slow person, which was a very strange adjustment. Um, Weirdly enough, though, going for these long, slow walks is the highlight of every day for me. I do pace things out. So I'd have to agree that a lot of what worked no longer works that way. And even with the journaling, I turned into a voice memo guy. So that's what these walks are really about. So I can talk to myself and no one can watch me talk to myself for too long. But yeah, works for me. Works for me.
I love that. And the new one of the new updates, if you have an iPhone, the voice memos now have transcripts. They didn't have them before. And so I actually started doing that too. I started voice memoing and I can copy and paste the transcript into a Word doc. So I actually have like a journal without having to go back and listen to it because I struggle with auditory processing as well. So yeah, voice memos. That's a great tip. All right. So our next question is, how do you help yourself stay consistent through the ups and downs? So Charlotte, why don't we go to you first?
I go to the chiropractor either weekly or bi-weekly, and he does what's called functional analysis chiropractic technique. He watches me walk and then he can see what's wrong, and it really helps me. And sometimes I just need to rest. And he's always telling me, you need to rest more. Your brain is healing, and it takes a lot of energy for your brain to heal, and you need to rest. And so those are things that I consistently do to make things a little bit better in life.
Thank you, Charlotte. All right, Steph, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I really redefined what consistency means to me. It's not about doing the same thing every day. It's more about honoring those rhythms and that flow that my brain and body need, the way that it needs me to show up. I'm able to kind of anchor in those non-negotiables. Everybody's got to brush their teeth and things like that. But to use the ebb and flow of what my body needs on any given day. Like the first thing I do every morning during my quiet time is really like do that check in. Where am I at today? What is on the schedule today? And what do I need to take off of the schedule today? That's kind of part of my non negotiables. But, um, and I just kind of like that's the consistency is that I'm looking at it every day. I'm looking at the now and not 6 days from now, 2 days from now, 3 weeks ago, any of that, but kind of just being more present.
I love that. And I loved how you mentioned non negotiables because, yeah, it's very similar for me. There are essentials when it comes to brain health and brain injury recovery. And there are non negotiables as far as being a human. Like, we got to shower, we got to brush our teeth, we got to stay hydrated, we have to eat protein and, fiber and all those things. But then it's like outside of that, I have a hard time staying consistent with exercise because of my dysautonomia and because of I have a hard time staying consistent with that. I work at a computer, so I actually got a standing desk that I have learned to use on days that my brain has the ability to help me to not be sitting all the time, right? And some days it's like I have a treadmill there. Some days I walk on the treadmill. Some days I just stand. Some days I don't have the capacity to do the walking part. So I think learning what are your essentials, what are your non negotiables, and staying consistent with those while allowing grace and room for what they look like each day. I really, yeah, thank you, Steph. I really related to that too. All right, Farouk, what about you? How do you help yourself to stay consistent?
Um, I make a lot of these things a ritual. A lot of what I do, I make sure that I know why I'm doing it. Because to me, the consistency is it's not about the activity, it's about me. The way it was explained to me is that rest and relaxation does not come from doing nothing, it comes from alignment. So, how do you remain aligned with yourself? So, you have to listen to yourself, obviously. But when I think of it that way, I ask myself, how do I feel? And then usually the activity, like say exercise, I love exercise. I mean, I'm not lifting the weights I thought I would be lifting, but I enjoy it as a privilege because I know that this was not easy to do. It was not easy to get here. It's still not necessarily easy to do, but the consistency is that I get to I get to do it today. I get to enjoy it. It's a privilege. There's one other thing. I think about what would be a wonderful gift to give myself. So hypothetically, tomorrow, as hot as it is, right now, tomorrow, the best thing I probably could give myself is a really hydrated body. So today would probably be a good day to drink water. And that's how I think about it. It's not about, did I go to the gym today or did I work out? Did I read that paper or that I said I was going to read? It's what tomorrow me appreciate.
Thank you for sharing. That's such a great way to think about it. How can we give that gift to ourselves for tomorrow? And as we go through our brain injury recovery, what gift can we give to our brain and our brain health? I love that. Nothing to add. Uh, all right. So we are getting towards the end of our time here. So I'm just going to ask our last question here. If there is one message of hope, or you could put in some advice that you would like to share with survivors and families, what would it be? So, Steph, let's go with you first.
I think really, I mean, to everyone out there are other people on this journey. Join them, find a support group. Hope Survives has a lot of them that are great. There's also other ones out there that are great. Definitely like find your support system. But remember that habits, if they're not serving you, pivot, change, adjust. And then when you try those things again, try them out of curiosity and not out of judgment.
Say that again for the people in the back. I'm serious. Say it again.
Yeah. I mean, try those habits again. Try them out of curiosity and not out of judgment because it's so easy to go into something with that negative, well, this didn't work last time, so it's not going to work this time attitude. But you know what? It might work. So investigate. Will it work? Let's see what happens if I do this again and really just approach things that way. Keep going. You're doing the work and it matters.
So good. Thank you, Steph. All right, Charlotte, how about you? If there's a message of hope you'd like to share with survivors and families, what would it be?
I would say to journal when you can. And for me, I don't remember to do it every day, but just occasionally. And sometimes I just put it in notes on my phone. Other times I'll write it. I have some actual journals that I'll write it in. But then the good thing of it is you can look back. This journey is so, so slow. And it just seems like one step forward, two steps back. But if you look back, where was I at 3 years ago? And where am I at today? Wow, I've made huge strides. And helping others. My doctor told me that the more you help others, the more you help yourself. we have a huge flower garden. And I know, Cristabelle, you've said that you didn't know how to play or write music or anything before. Well, I haven't gained that. I still can't play or write music, but the thing I did learn I can do is arrange flowers that I never did before. And so last summer we gave away 100 bouquets out of our garden. And it just is such a delight seeing the smiles on people's faces and making their day.
Oh, I love that. I want to see pictures of your flower bouquets. You'll have to send some over. We would love to see them. That and the onion in the ground. All right. So finally, Farook, bring us home. If there's one message of hope you'd like to share, what would it be?
I think I would say always look for the good that you want. Have faith. It oftentimes comes from something you wouldn't imagine. Everyone who's had a brain injury has had a conversation about neuroplasticity, about what the brain can do. And a lot of the times you find out what the brain can do and what you're capable of when you're doing something you didn't expect to be doing. So I say keep looking for the good and keep trying.
So good. Thank you. You have brought so much hope to those listening. I just know it. So many times when we're going through brain injury, we feel so alone, right? And so thank you all for sharing your experiences. If there's one thing that you listening could relate to, we just want you to know you're not alone. If you'd like to get in touch or have questions for any of our panelists, you can do that through Hope Survives. Email us hi@hopesurvives.org. We'd be happy to pass along a message. And we are so grateful. Feel free to join our support groups and stay connected with everything coming up. So before we go, I just want to thank our panelists. Round of applause for me that's not too loud or sensory overstimulating. And I just want to thank you all for being here. It has been a joy to hear from all of you on your journey. I know that you shared things with a smile today that have come out of many days of pain. And I want to thank you for that vulnerability. So until next time, thank you all for being here. Thanks for tuning in to Hope Survives podcast. Make sure to subscribe and stay tuned, and would love for you to consider leaving us a rating or a review. Check out hopesurvives.org for more. We'll see you next time, and remember, there is always hope.